Good evening. I'm NLC Chair Elizabeth Ivory, and I'm happy to welcome you to our first ever Zoom panel. Tonight, our moderator, Karin will speak with a group of Canadian artists, musicians, actors, and writers whose professional lives were upended by COVID. How have they stayed focused and productive in an online world? So without further ado, Karin, I'll hand it over to you to explore that question.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's good to see everybody tonight. I am in Coburg speaking to you from the Loft Cinema, and I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are located in the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. We respectfully acknowledge that the Williams Treaty First Nations have been stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that today maintain vigilance over their health and integrity for generations to come. We are all treaty people. And I welcome everyone to our evening tonight. I think we have a broader ranging audience than we ever have. I think we've got people from Europe going as far west as Alberta and BC. So welcome to our national audience. Creativity in the time of COVID. We've all had our trials and tribulations over the past 15 months, some of them very serious. It set me to wondering, what has all this done to artists, all this enforced solitude and enforced cohabitation sometimes? What effect has it had on these people who not only entertain us, but who, when all goes well, illuminate the meaning of life, if you like, just a little bit? So coming out of this, will the creative spark have been doused? Or will there be new artistic vision? And will it make a difference if you're essentially a solo act, a writer, or a visual artist, or if you're someone like an actor or a musician who thrives and bounces off the contributions of your colleagues, that you have to work in a group? There's lots of stuff to kick around this evening, if you like. I'd like to go through the practical stuff. The conversation with our absolutely fabulous panel should go to around 8:15, and then we go to questions from you. So please send the questions in on the Q&A function, and you've heard me say this before. Make them succinct, please. It makes it easier to read the questions, and we'll be able to get more of those questions in. And what else do I have to add? That because we have such a fine panel this evening, we've booked a little extra time. If the conversation is bubbling along, and if the majority of you are still with us, then we will bleed over that 8:30 time limit just a little bit, not forever. So let me quickly introduce our panel, and we will get to it. I want to go from east to west. In St. John's, Newfoundland, Greg Malone. He has been called a Canadian comedy legend. He joined us, Northumberland Learning Connection, a couple of years ago for our series on Newfoundland, really to answer the question, why and how has Newfoundland produced so many insightful, funny people? I don't know if you can really answer that question, but he gave it a good try. Greg Malone was part of CODCO, which was one of the most irreverent and clever practitioners of the art of comedy. CODCO won multiple Gemini Awards. And then he went on, as that slideshow at the beginning said, to publish 2 books, to run not once but twice for Parliament. When he ran for the NDP, he almost won, which would have been interesting. And when he ran for the Green Party, that didn't go so well. But there we are. And now Greg Malone is about to play King Lear this fall. So a man of many parts. Greg Malone, hello. Are you there?
Hello, hello, Karin.
Oh, good, you are there. Good. All right. Next, joining us from downtown Toronto, Roman BORYS, cellist of one of this country's leading chamber ensembles, a multiple Juno Award winner. That's the Griffin Trio. They are a piano trio, and often with a piano trio, it's the violinist or the pianist who make a lot of the musical decisions, determine musical direction. It's the cellist who holds everything together, if you like. Well, Griffin Trio are a very democratic bunch, but it's Roman BORYS who's always been the one to push the creativity envelope, if you like. They have, as a trio, commissioned new works, and they've always experimented with musical and theatrical forms. They've done stuff differently. The Griffin Trio, I have to add, are also directors of the classical music program at the Banff Summer School of the Arts. Hello, Roman BORYS.
Hello, Karin Wells. Great to be here with all of you.
Nice to see you.
Well, great.
Going a little bit further west, Emily Ercart in Waterloo, Ontario, National Magazine Award winner, and a writer who garnered a lot of attention with her recent book, The Age of Creativity. That book reflected on life, the life of her then and by now aging father, visual artist Tony Ercart. And she put paid to the notion that creativity fades with age. And she maintains that the creative spark cannot be extinguished either by age or by a pandemic. We can talk about all of that. Emily, good evening.
Good evening. It's nice to be here, Karin.
Lovely to have you all. And I should say Angela Hewitt will be with us. She lives in Europe these days. So what we did, and of course it's the middle of the night in Europe, and she has a concert tomorrow. So we pre-recorded a conversation with her a few days ago. We will play that conversation into our evening a little later on. And RENELTTA ARLUK will also be joining us. She is finishing up a Zoom call of her own at the moment. That's the way life is right now. So once she gets that wrapped up, she'll just sort of appear on the screen out of nowhere. She is a Dene and Inuvialuit woman from the Northwest Territories, raised by her grandparents on the trap line. She has Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Alberta and has been a big part of Indigenous theatre in this country for at least the past decade, has directed in Stratford, among other places. So that's what we're up to. Time for me to stop talking. Let me ask each of you, let's go around the table briefly. What have you been doing for the past 12 months or 15 months when you really couldn't do anything? Greg, I'm going to start with you. What have you been up to?
Fighting anxiety and depression, and like all my fellow actors who have been deprived of each other's company, and trying to reinvent myself. Well, Confucius says that when you can't change the world, you must change yourself from within. So then I was questioning myself. Well, am I completely based am I based on a performance-based self-esteem only? Is that my only self-esteem is performance and what I can produce, or is there something else here? So it's kind of made me go into myself and look, readjust, expand my philosophy. I've had to expand my philosophy and re-examine my values. And actually, I was inspired by the poet Cavafy, who I was introduced to by a lovely Greek man. And I've started to write poetry. So I've been writing poems during the pandemic. And that's new for me. I've hardly read poetry in the past 20 years, but I've read everything Cavafy wrote, and I realized I want to do that. So I have been writing poetry, and it's been a great help to me. I attempted 3 Zooms. I did 3 Zooms of Shakespeare's Lear, who was very popular because, of course, he wrote Lear during the pandemic in England during the plague. And so we find a lot of parallels with King Lear. But, I found that very difficult. I did 3 readings, one with Bob Joy, who couldn't do Lear, but then his friends got together and did a Zoom reading for him. And another one where I played the fool and one where I played Lear. But I found afterwards, I would get off the Zoom and I'd say, I don't know whether they liked me. I don't know whether they thought what I did was good or whether they thought what I did was bad. I couldn't read the room. I couldn't read the people. And so I began to get paranoid about the whole experience, as actors will.
Let's hold some of that now.
Yeah.
And let me move on and ask Emily. You're a writer. Yours is a solitary art form. Has this lockdown worked for you? You've got more time with nothing to do, my dear. Not so.
That's a leading question. Well, I have two small children, and when the pandemic first began, I was teaching at Laurier, and then suddenly my children came home and they never left. And I was trying to finish my book as well, which came out in the fall. And to have to be honest, I had these competing dual, very negative narratives going on at that point. I thought, first of all, what is the point of finishing this book? Everything is dead on the water. Publishing is going to die. It's never, why am I even bothering? You know, to do these final edits, these copy edits, all of that kind of stuff to get the book out. And then also, I'll probably never do anything again anyhow, because my children are never going to leave. and I mean, neither of those were completely true. The book did come out in the fall. We finished it, and we finished it on time. The production schedule just ticked along, and promoting a book during a pandemic is not ideal.
Impossible. Yeah.
It's you know what that looks like. So it's a bit of a challenge to get it out there, and it's the kind of book I think that would have really thrived through word of mouth in small independent bookstores, and they have been closed for so long. So regardless, it had some nice attention, and in terms of my children being home, I have the opposite of the solitude that I so very much crave. Yeah. What did you call it? Enforced cohabitation.
Enforced cohabitation.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of that going on here. So it definitely has curbed my life in ways I could never have imagined. I've made my life so that it revolves around my children being at school, and that's when I get my work done. And that having a child in kindergarten has changed that quite drastically. So
all right, we'll come back to some of those points. Roland, what have you been up to? I always think of you as a restless animal.
Well,
I mean, has all of this driven you a little crazy?
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, I've always been one to try to maximize the number of things that I might juggle at any one
Same
time.
Yes.
So, as the pandemic set in. Actually, the interesting thing was that one of the last live concert that I attended and happened to be producing in Ottawa was in fact one featuring Angela Hewitt. So it's actually interesting how this is all sort of coming around. But for me, it was immediately sort of a big slowdown. I tend to be someone as the one in our group that's always thinking about the things, enjoying very much thinking about the things that we might be doing, the collaborations that we might be involved with. I was running the Ottawa Chamber Fest at that time, how, typically 1 or 2 years in advance, and I laugh with, so many other presenters, whereas we used to think 2 years in advance. The pandemic has brought it down to 2 weeks. It's amazing what we can get going in 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, and we can move worlds. But so there was this scatter shot. I actually, the trio very quickly had an opportunity to just jump on the whole live streaming bandwagon. Of course, as most classical musicians, we were very concerned about what sort of experience, we could possibly offer. Chamber music, live music is about the live, people in the same room. And we were very fortunate, and people in this region should know that Tricia Baldwin, who's the executive director of the Isabel Bader Center for the Performing Arts in Kingston, a gorgeous venue, just before the first lockdown, took delivery of a brand new German Steinway. And so there was this piano that was just begging, to be unleashed,
to be played.
And she, for a couple of years now, Tricia, being the visionary that she is, had been essentially preparing the venue to produce concerts on the internet in addition to on stage. So it only took a couple of little moves, and from May through till December, we were broadcasting concerts, and we were working with our agents. We were trying to sort of embrace this world. Classical music, as you know, for many years has been, sort of fraught with challenges. Where are the audiences? Where is it all going? So suddenly we thought, okay, well, this pandemic, this isn't going to be around forever. It's tossing our entire world upside down. Maybe this is the moment where the big rethink is going to take place, and that maybe, just diving into live streaming and really deciding whether there isn't a way that might be part of a longer term, sort of connection with audiences. It was the time. So we did that, and we had some wonderful discoveries. We learned, actually, we sort of had no choice but to learn how to connect with that green light on that camera and really
get past that fourth wall.
Get past it. And, listen, our group has been touring for 28 years. It isn't so hard for us to imagine people in a hall. And I'm telling you, that's what we did. And we always made sure that we had a live interactive component. So people were sending us questions on our, commenting everything from the fingerings I was using for the Beethoven to the color of my socks. And just, they were just thrilled to be able to connect with us. We'd mentioned their names. Our friends from Detroit would be, giving us out a holler. It was, so there was definitely something there in connectivity. We found a way. Now in January, it stopped. And since then it's been a different experience. We haven't been playing much. We are hoping to have our first live stream next week. But we have some concerts later this summer, and I've been going for a while. So I'll just end by saying that I've been spending a lot of time planning and replanning what it is that we're doing in Banff. And we just recently launched our first program there online. And again, we found a way to make it work, but
reinvent it. Yeah. Greg, a mutual friend of ours said he ran into you in the grocery store in St. John's. And he said, Greg said to me, I hope I live long enough to stand on stage in front of an audience one more time. What was the feeling that deep, that strong?
What was that again? What was the end of it?
Well, how deep is that feeling, that hunger for an audience?
It was very keen at the time, very keen. I think I missed a lot of the. I thought, I'm because of my age, I guess. I thought, I'm forced into retirement. I may never get back on the stage. You know what I mean? I'm around the house. People are saying, "What are you doing here?" Like, you know what I mean? And my life had no shape all of a sudden. You know what I mean? And so I was struggling with that, and I just wanted the reassurance of my peers around me, and I wanted to, project again and to feel that magic between myself and the audience, their laughter, their tears, and all that. I thought I was losing it. You know what I mean? I thought I would lose it if the pandemic kept going on. I won't get back there. A lot of young performers thought, gee, my career will not get started. I won't get, I'm losing my traction here. I won't get it back. And, but for the older guys like me, it was the thought of, maybe this is it for me. Maybe it's over
done.
for me.
Yeah.
I'm being pushed into retirement against my will. You know what I mean? So it was a very deep hunger, and it really drove me to look inside and to see what else was there. Yeah. Beside that, need, you might say.
Emily, I know you talk to other writers and you read what other writers are saying. What are you hearing back? What are they feeling and doing? And are some people capitalizing on all this solitude?
Well, I think it depends on your situation and the person. And but it is true that often writers tend to be more introverted. And I know for myself, I'm happy to be alone, which I never am anymore, except for right now, which is exciting. But early in the pandemic, I read an article about how writers were reacting to the sudden changes and if they were becoming more creative because of it. And the writer Emily St. John Mandel, who has a 4-year-old, said, "I've never had less time in my life. I'm doing nothing." And Richard Ford said, "This is the best time of my whole life. I am feeling very creative and inspired because I don't have to say yes to all those things that were, I was sort of being forced to say yes to before." And so as much as I relate to Emily St. John Mandel, just because we're in a similar stage of life, I could understand Richard Ford's point of view as well. There's that pressure that's being taken off, and you can just focus on your writing. You don't have to focus on maybe some of the more promotional aspects of it, which can be maybe a little less creative.
Did it drive you, I mean, as Greg said, did it drive you deeper into yourself at all?
I know, one of the problems for my situation, I'm sure for lots of situations, is that the pandemic has really killed the conditions necessary for daydreaming. So, there's all this stuff that happens as a writer, and I'm sure it happens in every creative endeavor, where so much of the work happens when you're not actually facing the work. It's when you've turned away from the work and you have this space where you're really not, well, you think you're not thinking about it, but your unconscious is working through some kind of problem or some kind of looking for a creative solution, or that's when the ideas come through. It often happens to me when I'm doing the dishes. But you like some kind of rote task where you don't have to really be considering your work. And one of the major problems with this pandemic is that everyone came home, and there's no blank space anymore to have those kind of daydreams. And by daydreams, I mean that sort of fertile, creative space where you're just not actively at your work. And
Emily, I'm going to stop you there because Reneltta has now joined us from Banff. Hello, Reneltta.
Hi.
You wrapped up your Zoom call, and here you are. So thank you. We're just going around the table talking about what everybody's been doing for the past 15 months. I mean, there you are in Banff. You're both an artist in your own right, and you're responsible for running a program. Banff is normally full of people doing stuff. So what have you been doing for the past 15 months? How have you dealt with all this?
Well, if you know, like Roman, we've gone virtual for a lot of our programming. And like I'm deep in planning for National Indigenous Peoples Day, which we're doing on Monday. And so we're engaging virtually with everyone, the same thing that we did last year. So the virtual engagement we've been mainly focusing on, and the other is when finding different ways to kind of know when are we going to start opening. So we've been kind of following the COVID trend and the COVID waves. It's so we're kind of planning for that with like high hopes that we can start having people on campus joining us again in the fall. But right now it's mostly virtual.
But you directed a play, and you were sort of breathing the same air as some of your actors in Edmonton, yes?
Correct. I directed 2 plays live. During the first wave, we did All That Binds Us, which was a collective between people of different cultures coming together to kind of have a conversation about like what binds us. And so we did live stream, so for people who were more comfortable watching from home. So we had multiple cameras set up in a bigger theater space at Edmonton Fringe Theaters. And then we could allow 15 people in the audience. And so we did a mix of that. And now knowing where we are in the third wave, that would never have been allowed. That never would have been able to happen. So I was able to direct Yvette Nolan's adaptation of The Birds at University of Alberta. And because U of A's drama department is an educational, performance as part of the educational system, we were able to kind of gather and breathe space or share space together, breathing within our masks. Performance were done in masks. It was, I have a lot of empathy and compassion for the students who are graduating during this time as performing artists. But grateful, got to be on stage, got to work with set designers and sound designers and vocal coaches and movement coaches. So you know, when we all work collaboratively, so it
That
was,
satisfied some of that need.
it
Yeah.
did.
I want to go to our Angela Hewitt video in just a moment, but Greg, I just wanted to ask you, Perchance Theatre in Newfoundland, with whom you work a lot, they did a very interesting thing, videoing speeches. Can you just say what they did?
Yes, we started in the empty theater, and I did a piece from As You Like It, and so we did monologues all around Newfoundland in different beautiful spots from all of different Shakespeare's plays. And I think she did 39 different monologues, soliloquies and stuff like that from the plays, from all of them. And so it was fun, actually. A lot of actors got a chance to do their bit, do their Shakespeare bit, and it showcased Newfoundland. It had a very expansive feel, so everyone was outdoors, and it had that nice airy feeling. And it kept the image of the theater alive over the winter, over that long winter, to people, for people who had been fans and patrons of the theater. And it kept their interest alive, and also peaked for what was going to come at the end. You know, it's kind of leading to a full-blown production at the end of it all. So I thought that was a good idea, really. Yeah.
And we should say, I mean, it's posted online on the Perchance Theatre website. And one of the things that I just loved, Mary Walsh is in there doing a speech. I can't remember which play it's from.
Richard III, I think she did.
So there's Mary Walsh as Richard III standing outside Government House in Newfoundland. And Mary Walsh does just fine Shakespeare. It's just fine, you know, really interesting stuff to look at. But okay, now, I mean, what we've established as well is that different places are opening up at different times in different ways. And that pertains internationally as well. And so I want to go to our Angela Hewitt conversation, and just let me mention, as our slides at the beginning said, she is Canada's preeminent pianist. I think that's fair to say. One of the biggest and greatest Bach interpreters in the world, and given the City of Leipzig medal, the only woman who has that. They say she has a large discography. I stopped counting when I got to 50 records. It's quite phenomenal. So let's, I'm going to summon up our very sophisticated control room here at Northumberland Learning Connection. And if everybody else can turn off their videos, we will now go to Angela Hewitt and the conversation we had. So control room, could you roll video, please? Hello, Angela.
Hello, Karen.
I said that we reached you in Europe. Where exactly are you, please?
I'm in Umbria, Italy, on Lake Trasimeno, my house that I have here. The lake is just outside that window. And yeah, it's between Florence and Rome, sort of equidistant. So that's where I am now.
Pretty nice. And you spend the summer there, right?
Well, normally I come for my festival, but I haven't been able to be here since last August. And so I came on June the 1st, finally, and I have one concert here on the 22nd, an outdoor concert. And so I'll give that. And then my plan is to go back to England for a few weeks to do some events there. And then I hope I will come back here as well. Yeah.
But things are opening up in Europe at the moment.
A little bit. I mean, it's better than it was. Yes, in Umbria, actually, just today we went into what they call the white zone, and so that means we've been able to have concerts for a while, but we can, but the capacity is of course half of what it normally is. So. But yeah, you can now go into restaurants, although I don't think I'll do that anytime soon, and visit people in their homes at least. So, and yes, so I've had some concerts in Italy, in Europe, but the problem, recently I had to cancel a performance I was so looking forward to in Vienna in the concert house, imagine, because they blocked people who had been in the UK from entering Austria. And so even though I flew through Vienna to come to fly to Florence, I couldn't stop there and give a concert. So that was really disappointing. But I gave in middle of May, England opened up for concerts with audience again. And so I was able to give a few in May that we made up from ones that had been canceled, which was great.
And I want to mention you did one at Wigmore Hall, and that has been live streamed and it's up on YouTube at the moment.
Exactly, that's right.
We'll put the link to that on our website.
Good.
Go back a bit. How did you get through that heavy lockdown period of the pandemic? I mean, you're a musician who's known as someone who embraced social media like mad. What did you do?
Well, I have always embraced social media. I was a bit of a slow starter, but then when the pandemic hit, and you know, I live alone, and I was in my one-bedroom flat in London, and at first one tended to sort of just go into oneself, and but then I think it was the end of March, around the time that England locked down, which is the 23rd of March. And I decided to put out a little Prelude to Bach on Twitter for the world. And I just put my iPhone on the end of the piano on the block at the end. And so you didn't see me, which I wasn't interested in showing myself, but you saw my hands, you know, playing. And actually it was a marvelous shot. And so I put out this little Prelude by Bach, and something like 150,000 people watched it, you know. Wow. And so then from then on until the 1st of June last year, I continued playing a piece every day, easier pieces that amateurs can play and that students play. And it gave me some company as well, you know, which was really nice. And so that tripled my audience online, actually tripled, you know, from what it had been before. And so it was a nice thing to do, really. Yeah.
Did that relieve the solitude to a degree?
Very much so, because I get up in the morning, and sometimes I do it since I wasn't showing myself. Sometimes I'd still be in my pajamas, you know.
Somebody mentioned that actually.
So I do it, and people who are, of course, in my time zone would have it for breakfast or a bit later, and people in Canada would wake up and wonder, oh, what's Angela posted today? And people in Australia and New Zealand were saying it was their bedtime, so we'll have a little tune from Angela at bedtime. So yeah, it was very much company for me. It really made a difference, I must say.
What about you and your repertoire? Did all that solitude make you go deeper, delve deeper, look at new stuff? What did it do?
Well, it gave me the time, since I wasn't madly touring around as normally I do, to really do some projects that I'd wanted to do for a long time. Two big ones. One was to finish my Beethoven Sonata cycle for Hyperion Records. I had recorded 30 of the 32 sonatas of Beethoven, and so I had the Hammerklavier, the big Opus 106, yet to learn. That, you know, piece that takes 50 minutes, 50. And so I started it in that spring lockdown, and I recorded it last November. So that was, you know, a huge project. But it was wonderful to do it while I was sitting at home, and while I really had the time. And fortunately, the apartment above me was empty, because it makes a hell of a racket, the Hammerklavier. So that was really lucky. And I recorded it along with his last sonata, Opus 111, which I had to take back into my repertoire. And then I also did another project, which was a lot of research. For 25 years, I had wanted to do a CD of love song arrangements for Hyperion, and I never had the time to put it all together and to find the repertoire. And so finally, the lockdown gave me the chance to do that. And I recorded that also last November, and that's coming out in a few weeks. A love song CD on Hyperion. So that, and then I was getting up the Art of Fugue again by Bach, which is another big thing. I had, you know, because I was supposed to play that in my last cycles of my Bach Odyssey around the world, but those concerts got canceled. And so I knew when concerts came back, I had to be ready with it. So I did a lot of practicing, besides the cooking and the shopping and the cleaning and the
Was it only a matter of having more time, or did the solitude make you dig deeper in any way or change
Well,
your perception?
well, you know, I've always thought that I'm dug deep in what I do, but
I'm sure you have.
but I think it did give me, you know, to not be rushed, to not have that feeling that, oh, I've got to not have the deadlines, you know, I have to have this learned in a month from now, and to really have the time for it to sit in, and you know, something like the slow movement of the Hammerklavier Sonata, which is 20 minutes long, and it's an incredibly tragic piece, actually, but sublime as well. And to be in the situation of the lockdown and to play that at, you know, I play that in the evenings, really, where you could, and London was so quiet, even, and I'm fairly central, but I could only hear the rumble of the tube trains underneath me. You know, I lived there 30 years and never realized I could hear the tube trains. But so it does something, it does something to you. And I think it has made me play in a little bit different way. I think the learning process, because also when you age, it becomes different how you learn things. You have to do it a little bit slower. It takes longer to get it into your brain and memorize it. You know, all that takes longer. But not being rushed gave me the time to really find that.
So you will come out of this slightly different, slightly changed.
Well, I think all of us will. Yes, I think we also, you know, our contact with people too. I think I think we realize, first of all, who are the people that mean the most to us, and who, you know, those that we can really rely on, but how important that contact with people is, you know, how precious that is, and how that's really the most fundamental thing in life. Yeah. I mean, I've given the concerts I've given now, you know, I've given many without any audience in the hall, and now I've given some with a small audience in the hall, but of course I'm not allowed to see anybody at the end. They're all, you know, during the concert they're all sitting there with masks, so you can't really, who's that, you know. Yeah. And then at the end everybody has to leave, which, you know, I'm one who likes speaking to people so much and signing CDs, and all of that for the moment has gone. So that's a little bit of a shame. But so I really look forward to that coming back, I must say.
I don't want to keep you too long, but tell me hadn't what's happening with your festival this summer?
Yeah, well, we're going to make an announcement very soon. We hadn't planned anything up until a few days ago. And then when I arrived here on June 1st and I saw that some of the festivals at least were doing something here in Umbria, I thought, you know, we really should try. And since we're allowed, I think I'll be allowed a maximum of 100 people in the audience. Normally we would have over 200. And in some venues, it might only be 50 people, in which case we have to play the concert twice. But that also creates an incredible intimacy. So we are going to announce soon, I'll tell it to you first, a mini festival from July 23rd to 26th, which is when I have time. And we will do videos so that if it's not a live stream, we will at least do some streaming that everyone around the world can participate, you know, can watch. And so that might even bring my festival to a wider public, you know, which is a good thing.
It's not all bad news, is it?
No, it's not all bad news.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, the hardest thing in the initial phase was really just getting through every day, because I think it was, you know, you had to stay incredibly positive, and you had to get up every morning and just tell yourself, at least I did, you know, I'm going to have a good day today, you know, because it was just too easy to get depressed. And when you see all your concerts falling by the wayside, all of that, it's very hard. But anyway, at least it's better now.
Let's end there with at least it's better now. And there is the prospect of a festival for you this summer. This is grand. This is grand. It's very nice to talk to you today.
Good. You too, Karen. And all my best to everyone at home. I won't get there probably till next January, but as soon as I can, I'll come.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela Hewitt. Okay, am I back? Yes, I think I am back.
Oh, you're in silent, Karen.
Yep. Okay, is that better? Have I back?
You're back.
Good, sorry. So I mean, Angela's saying the same thing as everybody else. It underlines how much we need people, but there's this hunger, this connection. And you know, in Italy, she's got some of the chance. Roman, just going to the music thing, did it make you dig a little deeper in terms of repertoire? Did you dust off music scores you hadn't looked at for a while?
Well, you know, I did. I mean, initially, you know, being, you know, having that classic sort of, you know, deep sense of self-criticism, I thought, oh, this is a great time to fix some of those fundamentals. You know, we just work slowly on that. Yeah, I did a bit of that, and it was great. And actually, it was really wonderful. You know, for a while. I mean, last spring, you know, it was beautiful. Somehow we didn't know how long this was going to go on, and just sort of embraced the fact that things had stopped, and really truly embraced it. And but I found after a while that my mind was just racing, trying to figure out how all of this was going to impact all of the organizing that I'm involved with, that's, you know, part and parcel with my world. Now, my colleague Jamie Parker, the pianist in our trio, I know that for Jamie, who isn't so involved in, you know, in planning things. I mean, he's a pianist. He practices 4 hours every day from, you know, 10 p.m. till 2 in the morning, cracks open his beer, makes one of his famous Facebook videos, and then jumps in. And if there's a hockey game, he gets on that. But, you know, he very much enjoyed being that guy. He pulled out a bunch of Schubert scores that he just hadn't had time to spend time, you know, hadn't had time because we're always rushing the repertoire, so many notes and this and that. So Jamie very much did that. I played through all sorts of repertoire and enjoyed, you know, kind of digging. I recognized that I had the time, but what I also appreciated was that for me, I mean, getting back to Greg's sense that you know, maybe this was it. We have colleagues who, you know, I mean, I'm 55, just full disclosure. So I was realizing, well, I think there's another phase. Hopefully there's another phase in all of this. You know, I had friends, the Roberto Occhipinti bass player, and I had many conversations. He's 65, and he was thinking, well, I mean, he has a recording studio, and everybody his age and all of his friends were just going in there recording every last bit thing that they could play, thinking that was going to be it. That was it. So I mean, I must say I've embraced it in that way. I've been doing a lot of reflecting, thinking about values, what's important to me as a musician, thinking about the next generation, thinking about the problems that all of these highly trained classical musicians, what is it that we can do through our programs in Banff and at U of T. And so it's been an interesting time with much consideration and just trying to figure out. I mean, I guess there's that optimist in me that thinks there's going to be this great opportunity to kind of coalesce new ideas and make some great things happen and just bring some people along. How's that for a long answer?
That'll do. Well, Greg, it's echoing a lot of what you're saying. I mean, you said you started to read Cavafy and to dig into poetry. I mean, similar sort of thing.
It is, and I have to say, whenever I'm in the act of writing the poem, working it out, or working out a play and trying to figure out the character, that's the happiest time, really, for me. That's when it's all happening. And afterwards, if the poem works out, well, I'm very happy, of course, and that's a cushion. I can sit on that for a couple of days. Hey, I've got a poem, I did something. Of course, after a couple of days, the pillow gets very flat and you're on the ground again and you've got to plump up.
Got to do something else, yeah.
Do something else. But to know that the act itself is really where the joy is, you know, that when you're, because it's a life of the mind. You can't see the room around you anymore. You're in your mind. That's a wonderful thing to have, and I've come to appreciate that so much, you know, and also the people too that I miss. I really, now when I stop and see someone in the grocery store, I give them more time. I stop and I really look at them, and I try to see what's going on in their life and enter into that a bit. Whereas before everything was so busy and, you know, you're rushing around, and now you've got nothing to rush back to. So stop when you see a friend and look into their life a little bit. So it has done that for me, and I appreciate that, because I needed to stop and look deeper.
Emily, I want to go to you because, I mean, you said, and we ran that quote at the beginning, that create is a verb. It's a process.
Yeah.
It's not a thing, right? Can you talk about, because I mean, this came out of your reflection on the life and work of your father, a visual artist, as he aged. How did all of this come to you, as it were?
Well, my dad, after he turned 80, people started referring to him as remarkable. And he is remarkably talented, but I sort of sensed that's not what they were saying. It was that it was remarkable that he was continuing to be creative. And I wondered why, and I wondered why we felt that way. And so that's kind of what sparked the idea for the research that went into my book. But one of the first things I found is that so many of the studies on creativity are based in the 1960s, and they really look at the product, and that seemed like the wrong approach. First of all, I don't think you can really study creativity in that way. I don't think it's something that you can quantify. And although there are absolutely creative products and we all benefit from them and they're important, creativity really is an act. It's an action, it's a verb, it's not quantifiable. And so when people are looking at older artists, and this is just getting back to the research that I did, and they're saying, well, they're not, the output has slowed, or, they're not producing as much as they used to, it doesn't mean they aren't still creative and thinking creatively and acting creatively. So that was one of my big takeaways, I think, from doing that kind of research. Obviously, my father proved it without me ever having to look at any research, but.
Reneltta, does that ring true in terms of the indigenous concept of elders and of more respect that's held in that culture?
Yeah, it's interesting to think that creativity has an age cap on it. Like it just doesn't seem that that's something that makes sense. One thing I love about being an artist is knowing that there's no sense of retirement, right? It's just, you keep going, because creativity doesn't stop, just changes and adapts to where you are in your life. And, elders carry so much knowledge, and their artistic practice is if they can't physically participate, at least they can tell the story of how that came to be, or like what are the teachings that go around that. So whenever we build artistic practice, there's always elders involved. There's always children running around. There's always food somewhere. There's always tea somewhere. And so to think, at one point I was a child running around, I was the adult doing all the heavy work, and then I get to be an elder and sit there and have tea brought to me. But the story and the creativity and the ideations of it, that doesn't really shift or change, except just where you are in that world.
And similarly, within this strange world that we're inhabiting at the moment, it's all still there. It just has to happen in a different way.
Yeah, and elders are on Zoom, like it's pretty wild. I just watched my grandmother, I got her a tablet. She's in her 80s, and I got her a tablet, and she's on Facebook now, and she has no idea how to use it. But every now and then I get this video call from her, and it brings me a lot of joy, because it's, this actually has created the opportunity for us to see each other. Whereas before it was just phone calls all the time. We never saw each other and we didn't engage. And so there's some gifts to this that I'd like to keep bringing forward when we can gather again, is to see each other more, like what Greg was mentioning about, like really connecting and seeing each other.
I know we're going to run over our 8:30, and that's good. I want to talk a little bit about sort of expanding art forms. And Reneltta, I want to stay with you for a minute, because you co-directed this astounding thing last year that has been, one of the most interesting artistic products this country has produced, Messiah Complex. What did the New York Times called it? Something like, what was it? Messiah, where is it? Messiah for the multitudes, freed from history's Bonds.
Wow.
I mean, it was wonderful. Had 100,000 hits on YouTube. What was it? What did you do? The Reader's Digest version. What was Messiah? What is Messiah Complex?
Well, Joel Ivany and Toronto Symphony Orchestra were kind of the brainchild behind that. They were going to do Handel's Messiah. And then when the pandemic hit, they were going to do it, but then came up with this idea that they would do it with soloists from every territory and province in the country. And you know, Joel, if you know Joel Ivany and Against the Grain Theater, like he's very creating works that are diverse and engaging and just actually making a lot of space for multiple voices to engage in opera. And so the premise was that every singer was going to be a person of color, and most of them were going to be Indigenous. And so when the Indigenous artists started coming forward, Joel reached out and said, would you be interested in co-directing this with me? It doesn't make sense that I'm the only one directing. And I said, well, if everyone wants me to direct, I'll direct. And they were like, yes. And I was like, okay. And so what was beautiful is that I've seen a lot of this country because I've traveled as an artist. And so when I started meeting with the soloists, I knew where they were. I could envision where they were because I'd been there, and I knew that water, I knew that land, I knew the migration, I knew I just have such an interest in the earth. Like I love it. And so pairing them up with the filmmakers was the big thing, was making sure that the filmmaker also understood the aesthetic that the singers needed. So they worked with the text, we dissected the text, we envisioned what that could be for them, and then we met with the filmmakers. Sometimes I storyboarded, which was a new technique I'd never done before, and then off they went. And then I would go through the editing process and just kind of see that what we envisioned is what we saw. And as I was connecting with Joel, I said, you know, Joel, this is going to be really impactful because we've been in our own homes for as long as we have, and now everyone's going to be able to see the land through the indigenous perspective, and that's going to be really powerful for people. And it was, you know, that there's just a perspective to engaging with the land through an indigenous lens, and then the words that supported that vision and that feeling and emotion was really quite powerful. So yeah, Reader's Digest version.
There were stunning shots of a woman in the north in a full parka delivering a solo against a snowbank, a field of ice, and then a cellist playing, sitting in a chair on the side of Robson Street in Vancouver, like the urban. Quite incredible. Just practically, will it be shown again? Is it up? Can you get it again?
I'm sure. It was on Stratford at Home as part of their series, and then it showed again in Easter. I'm sure that it'll have a life and maybe other iterations. I think Joel and I are talking about how can we bring this to life? Like, how can we bring life to it? And is there a way to kind of meld the two worlds? I mean, that's probably a lot of that we're having these conversations about, is how are we thinking of hybridity now? Once we're able to come together, are we going to let go of this? I'm not sure that we should. There's a sense of accessibility that, you know, a lot of people that I know who are disabled said, this has been incredible for me because I've been able to witness theater that I wouldn't have been able to witness. I'm able to go into spaces I was never invited into. And so I think so what made Messiah Complex also really quite powerful is that Messiah Complex went into Indigenous communities that would never have seen Handel's Messiah.
Right. Yeah, and on their own terms.
Yeah.
Emily, I mean, there you sit, and in terms of craft and the raw materials, you're dealing with the simplest of stuff, right? It's the horrible blank piece of paper and an implement to write with. I mean, so you must not be looking at an expanded form, or are you in any way?
You know, I wouldn't say I would be looking at an expanded form. I have been working differently for sure since this whole thing began, maybe in smaller periods of time and more in my head than than actually getting anything down on paper. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to go back to a situation where I have a home where nobody's in it again. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but but that would definitely change things. But no, I feel like in terms of my writing, I definitely feel like my writing's changing, but I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with the pandemic. But I also think we may look back on this time and realize we're changing in ways that we aren't actually conscious of. So maybe it does have to do with the pandemic and I'm just not aware of it at this point, but it's definitely changing.
So on the most literal level, you're doing a bit of work now with some folklore, and is some of that to do with the pandemic and that kind of thing? Are you finding things in folklore?
Yes, right. Of course, so the pandemic inspired a project that I've been working on about plague folklore. I looked into a lot of the legends that were collected, Scandinavian legends that were collected about the Black Death, and I read them really at the height of the sort of March, April of 2020. And it was kind of a nice escape from looking at social media and looking at the news, because although I was reading plague legends, it was actually really hopeful, because obviously these are stories that were told by survivors. These are stories that were handed down, and that inspired a new form of writing for me. Certainly, it's a project that I would not have. It would never have happened without the pandemic, for sure. So.
Greg, in Newfoundland, I mean, you had a relatively small number of COVID cases, so the idea of survivors isn't quite the same in Newfoundland. I mean, has that made a difference to what you're doing?
I'm having trouble now hearing.
All right.
For some reason.
Okay. I'm going to turn to Roman at the moment, and we'll see if you can hear in a minute. Roman, can you talk a little bit more about pushing the envelope on the kind of
I have an unstable video connection. I'm not getting, everything is breaking up.
Hang on, poor old Greg's trying to get on board here. It's Zoom, folks. Things happen. Right? Okay. Greg, can you hear us, Greg? No. You're on mute, I think. Oh dear.
He'll be back.
No. Okay, you got me now?
Oh, got you now. Yes. So just
all right. Sorry about that.
No, it's quite all right. Life happens. Quickly, because there were fewer cases in Newfoundland, did that influence the feeling? Although you're still dealing with the same lockdown,
And that's right. We still are dealing with the same lockdown, but it does have a different feeling. And Newfoundland is so well sparsely populated, I suppose, too, that it's easier to get outdoors and walk around and feel like that you're not inhibited in any way. And so I found that great. And you see a lot of people out walking, and they'll stand away from each other and have a chat on the corner of the street, but standing back, and then they'll go on their way. So there's a lot of socializing outdoors, and a lot of you really don't feel cooped up too badly here, because you can get out and walk around, but so easily, and there's such nice walks to take. But we're just about to reopen the Atlantic bubble eye here, which is good, which means we'll have free communication between the other Atlantic provinces.
Yeah.
And at the end of the month, they're planning to open up the theaters and bars and other sort of places where large crowds of people can congregate, and so that's going to happen. We're in a pretty good position with Perchance Theatre, because it's an outdoor theater. It's a theater in the round, like a mini Elizabethan theater that's open to the sky, even though the audience is covered. So that helps too.
Yeah. I want to just go to Roman, if I could. Roman, just briefly on this question of sort of pushing the envelope in terms of artistic form. You've been doing a whole lot of interesting stuff. Can you just explain briefly and as simply, if you could, what you've been doing?
Well, it sure. I mean, it all started actually with an incredible opportunity tied to our relationship with the Banff Center. I mean, despite the fact that everything completely closed down last summer, the Indigenous Leadership Program led a weekly discussion group that went on RENELTTA. Was it 4 or 5 months? It felt like, and it gave us an actual. It gave the Griffin Trio, this this prime example of what it was that the settler community brought to the to Turtle Island. Gave us an opportunity to come into a completely new understanding of what our role might be as we lean into truth and reconciliation. And through that process, which was, I must say, at times, I mean, incredibly, I mean, always moving, sometimes incredibly difficult to just sort of ponder and sit there and just realize. I think I'll never forget the first moment where I felt, as white male, European background artist, and just really feeling the weight of the responsibility that that I carry in all this. In any case, that'll be an ongoing thing for us as artists as we go into this sort of next phase. But we came into these incredible relationships with RENELTTA and with a fellow by the name of Rai Moran, who was the chief archivist of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the founding director of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. And after this whole session was over, we just came together, and it took a number of conversations, but to sort of move it along, we now have this project that we call Echoes, Memories of the World, and it involves a number of Indigenous artists and a number of non-Indigenous artists from Canada, Norway, Mali, and Austria. And we are exploring the whole idea of social memory and just how it is, and really looking at that from the perspective, from the Indigenous perspective, whether it be in Canada or through the eyes and the soul of our Sami collaborator, a wonderful poet, Raudna Tsarita, from the north of Norway. And a number of musical partnerships have kind of come together, and an incredible thing in Norway called the Future Library Project, which I invite everybody to check out, is part of this. And we're having a conversation, a collaboration, a collaborative creation that is unlike any production that I've been involved with. We gather, we put things on the table, we discuss things, we come up with priorities, we develop deeper relationships, and we have a workshop in October in Kingston, during which point we are going to learn about what it is that this piece and the storytelling that is going to emerge from it, what it's really going to be all about. And that's a completely different process for us.
Well, because that's what I wanted to ask you is, just sort of contradicting or flying in the face of what Emily said, people would want to know, what is the thing that you are creating? I mean, this is great to have all these great long conversations, but what is the product? Well, and I take Emily's point, it's about process, but you want to know, what am I buying a ticket for?
Well, you'll be buying a ticket for a 70 to 85 minute presentation that will involve artists on stage, all of which will be doing things that audiences might expect and not expect. And there'll be all sorts of signs of collaboration and deep understanding and storytelling. There'll be artists from Norway, Canada, and I tell you, RENELTTA's going to help us figure it all out in October.
Will you get to play the cello? I mean, that's
throughout I'll be playing the cello and telling stories through the cello. We have in any case, I mean, it is this incredible process in that anything else I've ever been involved in producing had to do with that daydreaming, imagining the plausible, being sort of embracing things that have inspired me. And if all those things are happening here, but what's not happening yet is this, I mean, collectively, we are having this sense of light bulb and clarity. It's not just one person's vision that everybody's going to fall behind and go. I mean, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see, but I know that eventually we'll get to, certainly in October, we'll get to a place that we know, we have an idea of what it is that we're making and putting on stage next summer, and that'll be just in time.
Okay. I've neglected to tell people to send in their questions. We're getting some questions coming in anyway, which is a good thing. I've got one here for Greg. Simple question. Are most performing artists extroverts? Or is it just some sort of folks? And you know, how do you get that buzz going when you can't perform for anyone in the flesh? We're back to that question again. But
I think it's a hard question to answer. I don't know whether I'm an extrovert or an introvert, really, but I think I bounce between the two. And I know a lot of actors, and some of my favorite actors are quite mild-mannered, quite careful, gentle people, not the usual flamboyant, you know, performer that you would think. So I don't know. And yes, getting a chance to do your thing, yeah, that's a big thing, and that I do miss it, but not as much as I thought I would, really. And it's, you know, as long as you have something to do, I think, that is creative and that absorbs you in any way, I think that gives you back what you're looking for. I mean, of course, I miss the relationship with the audience, and you finding out whether you've hit your mark right away, because if you get the laughs or if you get the, you know, the reaction back from people like that. But I don't think most actors are extroverts. In fact, I like to hide behind masks, I think, sometimes. If I put on a character, I can become the extrovert because I'm free. No one is seeing me. They're seeing another person. Yeah, there's that. I love that. I've always loved that about theater, that you can.
Question here that's come in from Maureen Brosnahan. Several of you spoke of accessibility and how your virtual platforms were allowing you to reach people who might never have heard or seen you before. What kind of feedback do you get from that? And can you give examples? Roman, I'll start with you on that one.
Sure. Listen, I think for many art forms, particularly those that are of interest to older audiences, there's, you know, I think what, you know, Zoom and this sort of virtual place has, I mean, it is going to be a way to extend their relationship with the artists and the art form. I mean, it will change, it will be different, but I've always believed that a concert is both, or as a concert producer, I was somebody that was not just managing and curating a cultural hub, but also a social hub. So in Ottawa, I know that as part of Chamberfest last spring, we started these you know, twice weekly meetings and called them chamber chats, and people just, they were so thrilled to see their friends. I mean, and Eric Friesen, you know, our colleague, still hosts these things. It continues, and I'm sure it'll continue. So I think there's a way of changing. I mean, we have to adapt. I mean, this screen space offers different opportunities, but I think these little squares that I see and the lovely faces that are there, and the fact that their expressions are changing and reacting to things that I'm saying, I mean, that's real. We can read this, and it touches us. And I think that will continue. And I think that's been a real discovery. I don't think people wanted to believe that really could happen in this way. And it'll be interesting to see if it fades or if it stays. But I'm hoping, you know, for many people, there'll be a good reason for it to stay, because they can't leave their homes. So this will be the way.
Emily, I want to go to you just quickly on this. You said way back at the beginning, it's a very frustrating year to promote a book, to get out there. I mean, you do think that as a writer, your job is done when the book is written, but there's a whole process as well for writers of engaging, of going and doing readings and stuff. So some of that happened online for you, Zoom for you?
Yeah, I did quite a number of different Zoom events, and it felt really good actually in the fall. I felt like I was really learning a new skill, this whole online platform and how to work it. And, and I found one of the interesting things about it was that I would get just as nervous before an event on Zoom as I would in person. And that's kind of—
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I just wanted to add about the accessibility question, just from a personal family perspective. My daughter has low vision, and so we take her to music events, and we really have to battle to get people to understand, the disability seating doesn't work for her. She needs to be in the very front. And some places are better than others. But there's an event we go to every year at Massey Hall, and this year it was online on Zoom, and it was the best for her. She could see everything. She could see all the instruments and all the musicians, and she could see their lips moving. That would never be a possibility for her in any other venue. So there have been some real positives for accessibility for sure with this format.
Right. Okay. That's rather nice. Reneltta, what were some of the challenges in producing Messiah Complex? And what was there positive that was gained from producing it during a time of lockdown? I mean, it must have been a bit of a nightmare to produce, you would think.
I didn't produce it. I just got to direct it. But you're right. It was a bit it was challenging. There was Joel, this is, I think, the conversation of being, how easy was it to pivot? And what we recognize with Against the Grain, I mean, it's Joel, he's got a team of maybe 2. He brought in 1 publicist and 1 videographer to bring all of the videos and films together, and worked with a filmmaker in every province and territory, that each one of them had a budget. When you talk about the beauty of the land, I think Joel started going like this to me, because he's shaking his fist, not trying to punch me. Because every time we had a conversation, I'm like, well, you know what this sounds like? It sounds like we need a drone. And he'd be like, no more. The budget is this. I'm like, but I think we need a drone for this one. And so because the land is so gorgeous, and you have to see it. You have to see the vastness. So I think the challenges are more of an institutional challenge than it is from a smaller organizational challenge, of that, where is it easy to pivot and where is it easy not to? And so that was the beauty of Against the Grain, was that it was easy to pivot into an online world and be able to do the deep, big work that it did. Whereas in an institutional way, that actually isn't as easy, because there's too many moving parts to allow it to go in that way. And there's so many unmitigated risks, no one had done this work before. And, there's a responsibility that comes with it. And so the risk factor, the ability to pivot, I think, were some of the easy things, but the challenging is just how to navigate an unnavigatable world. We've never experienced a pandemic, and what does that look like? So, yes.
I thought I'd just jump in with one tiny little thing. So Joel, while this was all coming together, Joel calls me up one night and says, Roman, how are we going to record this thing? We've got this choir. We've got this huge choir. The Toronto Symphony had kind of figured out how to do their thing. And he's explaining me what he's thinking. And he's asking me if I know an engineer that would be able to deal with this scenario. So how are they going to do it? Okay, lots of shower curtains. Okay, big room with only half the choir at once. And they created all of these partitions. Can you imagine singing in a big sort of gymnasium? And I mean, I would have loved to have seen the film of that, just full of these stalls, and all the singers were in these stalls so they could really sing. I mean, how that came together the way it did I mean, that's a whole story unto itself. I mean, it sounded so phenomenal, but I mean, I can just imagine, I think they did it at 918 Bathurst in this big room, all these shower stalls, and
Wow.
then twice. And of course,
So
in any case, all sorts of challenges.
But there's all sorts of people who get to sing in the shower, which is not everybody. Anyway,
Well, I think it's Roberto Lepage who always says, from constraints come opportunities. And my God, that is certainly
that was a big one. That one. And just before we close, you mentioned drones, Renelta, and Greg, in those Perchance Theater productions, there's all sorts of drone shots of Newfoundland, aren't there? I mean, it's,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and what's the way? It's just Perchance, www.perchance theater, right? The website for that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And we will post that one because those are worth looking at. All right, we have gone over our time. Yes. Any final words, Emily?
Any
How
final
are
words?
you coming out of this?
Oh, how am I coming out of this? I'm stronger, I think. We've been through a lot. Yeah. So if I want to end on a positive note, I have to say, I think stronger.
Greg, how are you coming out of this?
Well, yes, I agree with Emily. I think stronger and a little more resilient and more able to deal with the unexpected. And this is also nice. I get to meet other artists from other disciplines sometimes, like this Zoom and other things I've been at. It's always great to see other artists and how they're thinking and working and what they're dealing with. I really enjoy meeting all of you here tonight.
Good. Roman, final thoughts from you?
Well, you know, getting ready for phase 3. That's what I'm thinking, you know, just build it up, put it together. And
Yeah.
And Renelta.
Oh, yes. Well, I got my second vaccination yesterday.
Good
So
stuff.
the world is opening, flights are getting booked. It's very strange. But one thing I've really learned, and I've heard in this room, and I've heard in the room I was just in, and the room I was in yesterday, is that value systems are really important to us, and that we're really following what's important to our heart and our spirit more than what's important to our paycheck. And I think that that's the essence of artistry. I think that that's really what builds us and creates a stronger community. And so I'm coming out of this with an understanding that our values are actually writing themselves. And I'm grateful for that.
Thank you all so much. This has just been
Thank you, Karen.
wonderful.
thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
You're a
Thank
very
you.
good host.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Yeah, really good.
Always a great host.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm
Very
now
nice to meet you all.
nice to meet everybody. I'm going to
Thanks.
hand it back over to Elizabeth Ivory, who's going to give us a wrap up this evening. And I, with any luck, will see you next season in September. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay. Good night, all.
Thank you, panelists, all of you. It was wonderful to hear how you're creating during this difficult period. And thank you, Karen, for your great moderation skills, as always. So we are at the end of the season, I suppose we'll call it that, of NLC's Zoom events for the summer. We're going to be closing off in June and coming back in September. So we look forward to seeing you then. And in the meantime, if you would take 2 minutes or less to fill out or complete online the little survey that will pop up when we end the webinar any second now, we would appreciate that very much. So thank you very much again, all of you. It was a very interesting evening and we wish you all well. Thank you for joining NLC.